Randonautica, an app based on the principles of quantum randomization, gained popularity for generating random coordinates for users to explore. While it offers thrilling adventures, there have been some eerie and unexplained experiences reported. A group of friends decided to try Randonautica one evening, seeking an unusual and spooky adventure. They set their intention to discover something mysterious. The app generated coordinates that led them to an abandoned, dilapidated house in a remote area outside their town. As they approached the house, a feeling of unease settled upon them. The atmosphere felt a bit heavy with an eerie silence. Despite their apprehension, they decided to investigate further. The front door creaked open, revealing a dark and decaying interior. They cautiously stepped inside, their flashlights illuminating the debris-strewn rooms. As they explored, they stumbled upon strange symbols painted on the walls, adding to the unsettling ambience. The air was stale and filled with an indescribable scent. Deep into their exploration, they heard a faint noise from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. Fear coursing through their veins as they realized they were not alone. They hesitated for a moment before summoning the courage to ascend the creaky staircase. On the second floor, they discovered a single room with a door slightly ajar. The room was dimly lit by the moonlight seeping through the boarded-up windows. Shadows danced on the walls, creating eerie patterns. As they pushed the door open, a chilling sight greeted them. There, sitting in the corner of the room, was an old, worn-out doll. Its glassy eyes stared at them, seemingly piercing their souls. The doll was surrounded by scattered photographs showing people with frightened expressions. Overwhelmed by a sense of dread, they quickly left the house, their hearts pounding in their chest. They vowed never to return to that place again, haunted by the thought of what might have happened there and why they were drawn to it. It was on an autumn Saturday evening, the sky covered with a blanket of gray clouds. A perfect day for some exploration with the Randonautica app. My roommate Alex was the adventurous one and convinced me to accompany him on this unusual journey. He had heard tales of it leading people to bizarre, sometimes eerie locations, and given our shared love of the unexplained, we couldn't resist. We sat on our worn-out couch, opening the app on Alex's phone. We chose the option to focus on mystery and waited as it generated the coordinates. The destination was a 20-minute drive from our apartment, somewhere on the outskirts of town amidst the dense woods that we had never ventured into. The drive was quiet, with only the sound of the gravel crunching under our tires. As we got closer to the location, we saw an old abandoned house. Its once, I'm sure, bright paint, now faded and chipped. The wind howled through the trees, making the branches sway ominously. The house was surrounded by overgrown weeds and tall skeletal trees that almost blotted out the sky. We hesitated for a moment, looking at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. We got out of the car and began to approach the house. As we got closer, we noticed a sign on the gate, barely legible under the layers of rust. Beware of dog. We looked at each other, chills running down our spines, but curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to proceed. We pushed open the creaky gate and slowly made our way towards the house. The wooden floorboards creaked under our weight as we entered, and dust particles floated in the air, catching the dim light filtering through the broken windows. The house was eerily silent, except for the distant hoot of an owl. We began exploring, finding old, dusty furniture and cobweb-laden corners. Suddenly, Alex, who had ventured into what looked like a study room, let out a gasp. I rushed in to find him standing frozen, staring at an old photograph on the desk. It was a black and white photo of a man holding a dog, and the man looked eerily similar to Alex. We felt a sudden chill. The air around us seemed to turn colder. Just as we were trying to make sense of the photograph, we heard a low growl from behind. Slowly turning around, we saw the ghostly apparition of a dog, its eyes glowing in the dim light. We stood there paralyzed with fear as the dog began to approach us. Suddenly, it stopped, looked at the photograph in Alex's hand, and whimpered. We ran out of the house, not daring to look back, and we drove home in silence. We couldn't explain what we had seen, but we knew one thing. Randonautica had shown us a glimpse into the past, a past that perhaps was best left untouched. From that day forward, we decided to stick with safer adventures, leaving the mysteries of the Randonautica app for braver souls. Late one Friday night, my friend Rob and I were hanging out, bored with the usual routine. Rob suggested that we use the Randonautica app to embark on a spontaneous adventure. We both had a deep fascination with the unexplained and the eerie, so we decided to give it a shot. We sat on the edge of Rob's bed, the room dimly lit by his vintage lamp. We chose fear as our intent and waited anxiously as the app generated our coordinates. It pointed us to a location deep within the local forest, a place that we had never ventured into, especially at night. Despite the chill that we had got running down our spines, we packed a flashlight, we put on our jackets, and we set out. The drive to the forest was unsettling. The moon was shrouded by dark clouds, and the forest, usually a haven for chirping crickets, was eerily silent. As we parked the car and began our trek into the forest, the flashlight cast long, creepy shadows that danced with every rustle of the wind. We pushed past low-hanging branches and overgrown bushes, following the coordinates on Rob's phone. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging us into complete darkness. We tried to turn it back on, but it was completely dead. Our hearts pounded in our chest as we stood there, trying to adjust our eyes to the darkness. And just as we were contemplating whether to turn back, we noticed a faint bluish light emanating from deeper within the forest. Drawn by the light and with no other option, we decided to push on. As we got closer, we were greeted by a sight that sent icy chills down our spines. There, in the middle of the forest, was an old, decrepit well, the source of the blue light. It was glowing from within, an eerie luminescence that painted the surrounding trees in a ghostly hue. We wanted to, at that moment, turn back, but curiosity overpowering our fear, approached the well. As we peered into the well, we saw something that made our blood run cold. There, at the bottom of the well, were dozens of glowing eyes looking up at us. Suddenly, a chilling scream echoed from the depths of the well, a sound so horrifying and so unnatural, it froze us in our tracks. We turned to run, but both stumbled and fell, our nerves getting the better of us. With our hearts pounding in our chest, we picked ourselves up and began to run. We could hear the sound of something crawling out of the well, its growls echoing through the silent forest. We ran as fast as we could, not daring to look back until we reached our car. We drove out of there, the image of the glowing eyes etched into our minds. That night, Randonautica had led us into an encounter that we would never forget, a reminder of the terrifying unknown that lurks in the darkness. It was an experience that left us scarred, forever wary of the app and its mysteries, sometimes terrifying journeys into the unknown. It was an unusually quiet summer night when my friends Sarah, Mike, and I gathered around a small table huddled in Sarah's dimly lit living room. We had heard of the Randonautica app leading people to haunted locations, and being thrill seekers, we decided to test its dark reputation. We launched the app, the screen illuminating our anxious faces. We set the intent to horror and watched as the coordinates materialized on the screen. The destination was an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town, a place notorious for its haunting history. Despite our growing unease, curiosity got the better of us, and we resolved to explore. We arrived at the asylum, the worn-down old building looming before us. Its windows were shattered, and the once grand entrance stood in a state of decay. The wind whispered through the overgrown grass, creating an eerie symphony of rustling leaves and distant whispers. As we stepped inside, the air grew heavy with a dark sense of dread. Each creaking floorboard seemed to echo through the desolate halls as if the building itself was alive, holding its breath. The flickering lights from our flashlights cast long, distorted shadows on the peeling wallpaper. We ventured deeper into the asylum, our footsteps reverberating through the empty corridors. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and a bone-chilling coldness enveloped us. Suddenly, we heard a distant sound, a faint melody that gave us cold chills. The sound grew louder, drawing us towards a door at the end of the hallway. We pushed it open, revealing a room engulfed in darkness, save for a single flickering candle in the center. The candle's flame danced in an otherworldly rhythm, casting eerie shadows among the walls. The haunting melody grew stronger, emanating from an old, worn-out phonograph in the corner. Mesmerized and unnerved, we approached the phonograph. As the needle scratched against the vinyl, a hauntingly beautiful tune filled the room. But something was off, as if the music carried a message from beyond. The lyrics spoke of forgotten souls yearning for release, their tortured whispers lingering in the air. Suddenly, the room plunged to darkness, the candle extinguished, and the music ceased. We stood frozen, enveloped in an abyss of blackness. Panic surged through our veins as we fumbled for our flashlights, desperate to illuminate the darkness. When the light flickered back on, we found ourselves transported to a different section of the asylum. The walls were covered in cryptic symbols, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive presence. As we navigated the cold, eerie hallways, we realized that we were not alone. Whispers echoed through the shadows, chilling laughter swept through the air, and unseen hands brushed against our skin. Our flashlights revealed fleeting glimpses of ghostly apparitions, their hollow eyes and tattered garments etched into our minds. Terrified, we raced towards the exit, our hearts pounding like drums in our chest. But the asylum seemed to shift and morph, leading us deeper into its nightmarish maze. The walls closed in on us, the atmosphere suffocating us, as if the asylum itself was alive and hungry for our fear. We stumbled upon a door that seemed to materialize out of thin air. With no other options, we flung it open, hoping for an escape. To our horror, we found ourselves in a room filled with deranged writing scrawled across the walls. The words were twisted and incomprehensible, a madman's desperate attempt to communicate with the beyond. A sudden gust of wind extinguished our flashlights, plunging us into complete darkness. Panic seized our hearts as we groped blindly, desperate to find a way out. But then, a faint glow emerged from the corner of the room, drawing our attention. As our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we saw a figure standing in the center of the room. It was a spectral apparition, its ethereal form emanating from an unsettling aura. The figure beckoned to us, its bony finger pointing towards an ancient-looking book lying on a pedestal. Driven by a mix of terror and curiosity, we cautiously approached the book. Its pages filled with cryptic symbols and forbidden incantations. We could almost hear a whispering voice urging us to open it, to delve into the dark secrets it held. With trembling hands, we opened the book, unleashing an otherworldly energy that consumed the room. The walls shook, and the apparition let out a haunting wail that pierced our souls. We were trapped caught between realms, our existence hanging by a thread. In a final act of desperation, we closed the book, hoping to undo the horrors that we had unleashed. The room fell silent, the apparition fading away. As the darkness lifted, we found ourselves outside the asylum, the sun rising on a new day, as if the nightmarish ordeal had been nothing more than a twisted dream. Before the terrifying encounter that I'm about to share, I saw myself as a seeker of the unknown, a pursuer of the unexplored. I had a penchant for the eerie, the mysterious, the unseen. When I stumbled upon Randonautica, the app that generates random coordinates based on your intentions, I was undoubtedly intrigued. I decided to give it a try, not knowing that the decision would lead to an experience that still sends shivers down my spine. It was on a chilly October afternoon that I set out on my very first Randonautica adventure. I was alone, armed with nothing but my smartphone, my flashlight, and my curious mind. I decided to set my intention as the unknown. I wanted to dive into the mysteries that lay hidden in our everyday lives. The app took a while, but soon presented me with coordinates. They were in a remote area, an hour's drive from the city. The drive was pretty calm and soothing, the fading daylight painting the sky with hues of orange and crimson. I reached the location just as the sun was setting, the coordinates pointing towards an old, dilapidated barn that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. As I approached the barn, the temperature seemed to drop unnaturally. The air grew dense, almost suffocating. I pulled out my flashlight as I stepped inside, its feeble light barely penetrating the inky darkness. The barn was filled with old machinery and tools, rusted and covered in cobwebs. An inexplicable feeling of dread filled me as I ventured deeper into the barn. Suddenly, I heard a soft whimper, like a child crying. The sound, faint, barely audible over the howling wind outside. I followed the sound, each step heavier than the last, until I reached a small room at the back of the barn. The whimpering stopped just as I entered, replaced by an eerie silence. I shone my flashlight into the room, and there, in the far corner, was an old doll. It was worn out, and its once colorful dress faded, and its porcelain face now covered in grime. But it was the eyes that truly frightened me. They were glassy, hauntingly lifeless, but yet they seemed to stare right into my soul. As I reached out to pick up the doll, a sudden gust of icy wind blew through the barn, extinguishing the light from my flashlight. I was plunged into complete darkness. The whimpering sound started again, only this time it was louder, more desperate. I could hear the rustle of hay and the creaking of old wood and the doll's soft whisper, "Help me." I fumbled with my flashlight, trying to turn it back on, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice grew louder, and the whispers turning into screams. Then a sharp, cold hand grabbed my wrist, and I let out a scream, dropping the flashlight. I could feel the doll's icy eyes on me in the darkness. In a blind panic, I struggled to free my wrist, finally managing to break free. I ran, stumbling through the darkness until I felt the cool night air on my face. I didn't stop until I reached my car, the barn disappearing in the rearview mirror. I drove home in a state of shock, the doll's screams just echoing in my ears. That night, I lay awake haunted by the chilling experience of the night. The doll's pleading voice echoing in my mind over and over, her cold touch still lingering on my wrist. I tried to dismiss it all as my overactive imagination, but the terror that I felt was real. The next day, I decided to research the barn's history, hoping that it would provide me with some explanation. I discovered that it was once part of a large farm owned by a family in the late 1800s. Tragedy struck when their only daughter mysteriously disappeared. The family searched for her relentlessly, but to no avail. The grief drove them to abandon the farm, leaving everything behind, including the one doll that their daughter owned and cherished. Realizing that it was the same doll that I had an experience with sent shivers to my core. I had somehow invoked an unsettled spirit. I wanted to believe that it was just a coincidence, but the echoes of the doll's voice in the barn were too real to dismiss. I decided to return to the barn the following night. Many would think this was very stupid, but I felt a very strange responsibility to help the spirit find some peace. This time, I took with me a white candle, a symbol of purification, and a small piece of rose quartz known for its healing properties. As I entered the barn, the temperature dropped just like the last time, the familiar sense of dread washing over me. I moved towards the small room, the doll still sitting in the corner. I lit the candle and placed the rose quartz next to the doll. I spoke softly. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here to help you. I want you to find peace, and you don't have to be afraid anymore. The barn fell silent. Slowly, the temperature began to rise back to normal. The air didn't feel as heavy, and the sense of dread gradually lifted. I stayed there for approximately an hour with hearing no voices and no cold touches, just silence. When I finally left the barn, I felt a sense of relief. I hoped that I had done enough to help the spirit find peace. After that night, I deleted the Randonautica app. I had sought out the unknown, and I found it. Alright guys, so that was just some made up Randonautica stories, not real. If you guys do happen to use this app, don't go alone, take a small group, and don't go on private property. I know all this is common sense, but yeah, and have fun, foster your curiosity, and yes, thank you guys for listening. I will see you guys next time on Tales Told in the Dark. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you. And please leave a comment. I love you guys.